When we talk about India's environment, it's easy to break it down into pieces, right? We talk about the Himalayas over here, the monsoons over there, and the great rivers somewhere in between. But what if that's the wrong way to look at it? What if they're not separate at all, but are actually all part of one single interconnected story? Well, in this explainer, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to connect the dots, all the way from the deep tectonic forces under the Earth to the forests that grow on top of it, to see India's environment as the dynamic, living system it truly is. And that quote, that really sets the stage for us. Because if there's one single word that defines India's landscape, it's change. We're talking about everything from the slow, unstoppable collision of continents that is literally still happening as we speak, to the dramatic, seasonal flip of the winds that brings life-giving rain every single year. This is a place that has been and continues to be shaped by incredibly powerful, constant movement. So here's how we're going to piece this story together. Think of it like building blocks. First, we'll start with the absolute foundation, the tectonic collision that built the subcontinent. Then, we'll see how that foundation gave rise to the great river systems. After that, we'll look at the climatic engine, the mighty monsoon that powers the whole thing, which in turn shapes the forests. And finally, we'll explore what it means to live with the natural hazards that are part of such a powerful system. It's a story in 5 acts, and each one builds on the last. All right, let's start at the very beginning. And I mean the very beginning. To understand what's happening in India today, we have to go back millions and millions of years to the immense geological forces that literally built the stage for everything else. So the first thing you gotta get is this. The surface of the Earth isn't one solid shell. It's actually broken up into these massive, slow-moving pieces called tectonic plates. And when these giant plates grind against each other, crashing, sliding, or pulling apart, they release an incredible amount of energy. And that sudden release of energy, that's what we feel as an earthquake. And here's the crazy part. This isn't some ancient history lesson. It's happening right now. The Indian plate is still pushing northwards at about a centimeter a year, ramming right into the massive Eurasian plate. Imagine a slow-motion car crash that's been going on for millions of years. That force has crumpled and buckled the Earth's crust upwards, creating the tallest mountain range on the planet, the Himalayas. And because that pressure is still building, day after day, it makes this entire region one of the most high-risk earthquake zones in the world. So you've got this massive wall of mountains. What happens next? Well, that collision didn't just change the skyline. It became the life source for the subcontinent's arteries, the great river systems that carry water, soil, and life itself down to the plains below. And what's fascinating is how this geology gives you 2 completely different river personalities in India. On one hand, you have the Himalayan rivers. Think of them as young and energetic. They're born from young, still-rising mountains. They're fed by snow and glaciers, so they flow all year round. And they have the power to carve out deep, dramatic gorges. On the other hand, you have the rivers of the older, more stable peninsular plateau. These are mature rivers. They're rain-fed only, they have shorter, well-established courses, and they flow through wide, shallow valleys. 2 totally different characters born from 2 different geological stories. And those young Himalayas, they give birth to some absolute giants. We're talking about colossal river systems that define North India. You've got the Indus system way out in the west, the legendary Ganges system right in the heartland, and the mighty Brahmaputra that starts in Tibet and thunders through the east. All of them trace their origins right back to those mountains. Okay, so we've got the mountains, we've got the rivers, but what makes the whole system tick? What gives it that annual pulse, that rhythm? Well, that brings us to our next major system, the mighty monsoon, the climatic engine that powers the entire subcontinent. Now, when you hear monsoon, you probably just think rain, right? But it's so much more than that. At its very core, a monsoon is a massive, seasonal reversal of winds. For one part of the year, the winds blow steadily from one direction, and for the other part, they completely flip and blow from the opposite way. This giant switch is what defines the climate and, really, the rhythm of life across this part of the world. So how does this engine fire up every summer? Well, it's a pretty cool 4-step process. First, the huge landmass of India gets baked by the sun, heating up intensely. This heat creates a massive area of low atmospheric pressure. Now, nature hates a vacuum, so the cooler, heavier, moisture-packed air sitting over the high-pressure Indian Ocean gets pulled in to fill that gap.
These winds rush towards the land, carrying all that moisture with them, and when they arrive, they burst over India as the southwest monsoon. But here's the thing. The monsoon plays favorites. Big time. The difference in rainfall across India is absolutely staggering. Just look at this. In one corner, you have Mawsyn Ram in Meghalaya, which gets over 1,000 centimeters of rain. It's one of the wettest places on Earth. And in the other corner, you have Jaisalmer in the Rajasthan desert, which gets less than 9. That incredible contrast just shows you how much the local geography, like where the mountains are, interacts with this huge climate system.
Okay, time to connect the final dots. We've got the geology that built the mountains, we've got the rivers that flow from them, and we've got the giant climate engine that fills those rivers with water. So, what do you get when you put all of that together? You get life. You get the vast, varied, green mantle of India's forests.
And if you look at the breakdown, it's no surprise what comes out on top. A full 50% of India's forests are tropical deciduous. And there's a very simple reason for that. They're often called monsoon forests because their entire life cycle, shedding their leaves in the dry season and bursting back to life in the wet season, is perfectly tuned to the rhythm of the monsoon.
It's actually a pretty simple formula. The amount of rain a place gets directly determines the type of forest you'll find there. In places that get drenched with over 200 centimeters of rain, you get those dense, lush tropical evergreen forests that never lose their leaves. In that big middle band, getting between 70 and 200 centimeters, that's the sweet spot for the dominant deciduous forests. And where rainfall drops below 70 centimeters, the plants have to adapt, and you get thorny bushes and cacti. It's a direct, visible consequence of the monsoon. But there's a flip side to all this power, isn't there? These incredible continent-shaping systems, the tectonics, the rivers, the monsoons, they create both life and risk. Living inside such a dynamic environment means you have to confront the natural hazards that are just an inherent part of the whole system. Now, before we go any further, we need to get one thing straight, the crucial difference between a hazard and a disaster. A hazard is the potential for something bad to happen. It's the unstable mountainside in an earthquake zone. A disaster is what happens when that potential becomes reality and intersects with people. It's when that same slope actually collapses onto a village. The hazard is a feature of the natural system. The disaster is the tragic outcome when we're in the way. And the scale of these hazards, it's just mind-boggling. Remember those giant river systems supercharged by the monsoon? Well, the direct result is that 40 million hectares of land in India are considered flood-prone. To give you some perspective, that's an area larger than the entire country of Germany. And then, at the very same time, the monsoon's unreliability creates the total opposite problem. In any given year, almost 20% of the country is suffering from drought. It's the perfect, stark illustration of the two extremes of this powerful system, catastrophic floods in one place and devastating drought in another. So, facing these huge, recurring challenges has forced a really important change in thinking, not just in India, but around the world. It's been a shift away from just reacting after a disaster hits towards proactively trying to manage the risk beforehand. These milestones, like the UN's initiatives and India's own disaster management bill, they're not just boring bureaucracy. They represent a fundamental change in mindset towards studying these systems, mapping where we're vulnerable, and trying to get ahead of the risks before they become tragedies. Which really brings us to the ultimate question, doesn't it? When your entire nation is built within these immense, powerful, and often unpredictable natural systems, how do you do more than just survive? How do you actually build a resilient and thriving society? And that right there is our key takeaway. India's environment isn't a list of separate topics. It is a single, deeply interconnected story. The geology created the mountains, which dictate the path of the rivers. The monsoon engine gives those rivers their power and waters the land. And together, these forces create both incredible biodiversity and immense natural challenges. And if there's one thing to remember, it's this. To thrive in this landscape, you have to understand the connections. You have to see it for what it is, a single, powerful, living system.